Welcome to the IonaHoops.com podcast with your host, Guy Flottico.
Oh, Merry Christmas. A little holiday gift for you all. A quickie podcast to close out non-conference play and start the transition to MAC time. We're going to bypass the IOTAs and all the other nonsense we do, and we're going to recap all 3 games in Hawaii, and I'll give you some hot off the presses reaction to the Gales and their non-conference performance now that it's complete. We'll set the stage as we enter 2023 with a preview of our game against St. Peter's. And I'll give you a couple quick notes on the podcast as the clock turns to January. But first, let's take a look back at Iona's trip to Hawaii and the Diamond Head Classic. Coming off the New Mexico loss, Iona had their sights set on reestablishing themselves on the national landscape. Here was a great opportunity to face a couple top 100 teams in a potential path of Utah State in the semis and Washington State in the finals. They need only get by a disappointing SMU squad in the first round. Well, it was Iona leaving that meeting disappointed. The Gales led by 12 with about 11 minutes to go in this one, but then everything just totally fell apart. I mean, everything. And the Gales went on to lose 85-81. Offensively, Iona had some just terrific shooting, but just threw the ball all over the place. 18 turnovers, undoing wonderful offensive performances by Dennis Jenkins, Walter Clayton, and Nelly Jr. Joseph. The defense put up its second straight stinker, but this one was worse than New Mexico as SMU came in as one of the weakest offensive teams in the country. I mean, SMU turned the ball over 21 times. Hey, fantastic. But they shot 60% from the floor. 60! And also made 6 of 13 from 3. But really it was layup after layup, their guards getting to the basket at will. Now, the Gales did lose Barrick Jean-Louis to a knee injury fairly early in this one, though he had 2 fouls and into this one 7 minutes in. But the substitution patterns after that were a bit strange. Patino turned to Parker Weiss for 24 minutes playing time. Meanwhile, on the front court, in an effort to get Quinn Slazinski back into playing shape, he stuck with Quinn, who struggled on defense and also had 5 turnovers. Some of those were late, while Oshima just played 8 minutes in this game. I mean, hey, this is a deep team, but certain guys should be paired together to balance each other out, I feel like. And I think Barrick and Quinn go together pretty well when they're out there, but losing Barrick changes that. And not playing Oz at all just makes us pretty weak on the defensive end when you don't have Barrick either. Anyway, this one was a tough pill to swallow for the Gales and for their fans. So how would the Gales respond after being relegated to the losers bracket against Seattle on day 2? Well, pretty well, I'd say. The Gales started out fast in this one with a double-digit lead in the blink of an eye, then just kind of held serve the rest of the way in an 83-72 win. Wasn't without a bit of worry from Gale Nation, though, as the late Seattle run in the first half knotted things at 29 for the intermission. But Iona began the second stanza with another flurry, and Seattle really never threatened after that. The Iona D, much improved in this one. Seattle shot just 29% overall, 25% from 3. The O was a mixed bag, really. 48% shooting overall, just 25% from 3. Another high turnover game, 15 in this one. Hey, remember early in the season we were all worried about Nelly Jr. Joseph? Seems like forever ago now. Nelly has just been an absolute monster. Against Seattle, he had 26.7 boards, couple jams in there too. Dennis Jenkins, another solid game, 19 points, 8 assists. Oshima getting the start over Quinn in this one. Maybe Patino reads IonaHoops.com, who knows? If he doesn't, who does, really? Anyway, Oz had 11, 7, and 4 assists. 4 blocks. Sadiko Bine Ayo started in place of Barrick, had 7.6 rebounds. Walter Clayton had some major foul problems in this one. Played only 14 minutes, so we saw a lot more of Cruz Davis, who had 6. Don't want to forget Quinn coming off the bench. He had 9 and 8 as he continues to get his game to where we're used to seeing it. So even though the setting for this one was Hawaii, with the smells of the Pacific and flowers and palm trees and all of that, there was a foul in the air, and I do mean a foul. Iona was whistled for 31 fouls in this one. Seattle 20 on their own. Seattle shot 45 free throw attempts, making 32. So yeah, The D was better in this one than the past 2 games, but a few of the fouls for sure, some odd choices by Gale defenders. It happens. You're challenged to amp up your defensive intensity after a couple of bad outings, and you're gonna get aggression fouls for sure, but some of those were head scratchers. Still, a nice win against a decent Seattle team, and it set up a Christmas Day 5th place game against Pepperdine. You know, when you have lofty goals for a tournament like Iona had for Diamond Head, and then you fall in the opener the way the Gales did, it's hard to just kind of like shake it off and refocus. But I have to say, Iona really impressed me by doing just that after the loss to SMU. They had a good game against Seattle, no question about that. And then they followed that up with another double-digit win against another good program with a 76-66 win over Pepperdine to take 5th in the tourney. It's not the goal they targeted, but it was important for this team to put SMU behind them, perform well the rest of the way, and they did just that. The Gales trailed 17-16, 10 minutes into this one, but, took over the rest of the half to take a 35-25 lead into the locker room. Much like the Seattle game, they never really looked back after that. Iona led by as many as 19 in this one, holding Pepperdine to 39% overall, taking away their strength, which is three-point shooting, to the tune of just 21% on the day. The Gales shot 49% themselves, just 33% from 3, but it was, again, Nelly, 20 points, 13 rebounds leading the way. Walter Clayton, after the quiet day against Seattle, had 18, Quinn had 12. Dennis Jenkins flirted with a triple-double, 11 points, 9 rebounds, 8 assists. And Oz had 9. And once again, the Gales played this one without Barrick. Time's going to tell when Iona will have his services once again. We're hearing things like, a couple of weeks, but, we've heard all this before. So we'll just wait and see. So where does this leave us? Well, outside of the Princeton game, this non-conference season went, well, exactly as I predicted it would. People, you should be listening to me. I am the all-knowing Guy F. Just don't ask me to pick against a point spread. Anyway, to be fair, I thought Iona would be a bit choppier this season in terms of level of play. So beyond just missing the one game, this is still, I have to say, a considerably better team than I was expecting. And unlike last year, I don't think this team is really near peaking yet. I would say I have just 2 concerns coming out of non-conference play. First off, we did go 0-2 in true road games. This was an issue last year for Iona, and especially down the stretch in MAC play. And I do have concerns about that even entering MAC games. I am aware that New Mexico and Hofstra are both a lot better than anybody else in the MAC. And it's not like either team killed us in their building or anything like that. So there is that, truth to that. However, that does bring me to my second concern, and that's finishing games strong. Iona's blowing out people. I mean, they're just waxing people. It's lots of easy victories, and that's great. No end of game stress. The fans, it's comfortable. But let's look at the games that weren't blowouts. We faded very late at Hofstra. We faded very late in a neutral site game with Santa Clara. We faded very late in New Mexico. We faded late against SMU. Now, we did play very strong down the stretch against St. Bonaventure to the point where it became a laugher. But it was a close game with like 7 minutes to go. So there's that. And the Princeton game, we actually did have to play well in the closing couple of minutes to close that one out. So that's the oddity of it all right now. That's the one. But the other thing is that those other games have in common, all those losses in particular, is that the defense was rough in all those games. All 4 of those games we give up into the 80s. So the good news is that all 4 of those teams, again, are much, much better offensively than we're going to see in a typical night in the MAC. You want to hear an ugly MAC stat? 7 out of 11 MAC teams currently rank 266 or worse in KenPom offensive efficiency. Now, again, that said, life on the road in league play, and sometimes even at home, can be an adventure. Opponents know you better. It's a different story sometimes. It goes beyond the numbers. We've all seen it. We've all watched basketball enough to know how that happens. We're going to have to see how Iona holds over the long haul of league play. But based on the quality of teams that we've seen non-conference and how we perform statistically against those teams, it's really not hard to be excited for what's to come. Is 20-0 on the table? I don't know. I predicted 16-4 entering it after making the adjustment for what happened in Manhattan right before the season. I still feel 16-4 is a safe pick. People might think I'm a bit crazy. 17-3 might be a realistic goal. 18-2 seems to be a good fit as well. You're gonna have stumbles. You're gonna have close games, and again, can Iona survive those games on the road in MAC play when it's a 1-point game with a minute to go? Are we gonna do enough defensively to get over the top in those kinds of games? So that's the kind of stuff that remains to be seen. But it's so hard not to be excited for what's coming up in the next couple months. And what better segue to what's coming up than to get right into our preview of our next game at home against St. Peter's Sunday, January 1st. I know I said this before the season, but St. Peter's is the only team in the entire country that could legitimately walk into this season being okay with the fact that they won't achieve what they did a year ago. The Elite Eight was the stuff of MAC legend, for sure. Something none of us will ever forget. I mean, we all were Peacock fans for the month of March. But it's a new season. And the Peacocks, well, if they're lucky, they'll make the Elite Eight of the MAC tourney in March. They enter MAC play with the third worst Ken Palm in the league, floating around the 280s. They're off to a 1-2 start in conference play, and they do host Manhattan on the 30th, 2 days before our game on New Year's Day. Like so many teams, the Peacocks have been erratic, as low as losing to St. Francis, New York, one of the worst teams in the country. But they did take down Quinnipiac in Jersey City a week ago for their highest rated win. In their only games against top 100 rated teams such as Iona, they were against Seton Hall in Maryland, and they lost by at least 30 in both games. Clearly, they weren't going to sneak up on anyone this year. But league play, as we said, is a different monster. We take nothing for granted. And the Peacocks are not devoid of talent. They have a bevy of capable guards, led by Isaiah Dasher, 13.5 points, 38% from three. Jalen Murray, 12.6 points, 50% from three. Also, Latrell Reed and Jaden Saller both have potential. Up front, they have a little less to work with, thus far led by freshman forward Corey Washington, 7.8 points, 5.4 rebounds, 76% from the field. The Peacocks, like I mentioned earlier, struggled mightily on the offensive end, almost all facets of the game, but there is one thing that they do well, and that's hit the offensive glass, and that's something that Iona's not great against. So we're going to have to watch that as a thing. St. Peter's game plan might be just to throw it up there and go get it. Who knows? So we'll have to see what happens there. Defensively, this is not the defense of the Shaw teams, or for that matter, the Dunn teams that when he was there. They do a nice job preventing the three, and they do block shots pretty well, but there's no reason to believe that they're going to stymie the Gales, especially at Hines. So the trend the rest of the way, this is going to be the trend the rest of the way, with only MAC games remaining. Iona is going to be certainly be double-figure favorites in every league game at home, period. There's not even a question of that. Are they going to be challenged at home by anybody? I mean, St. Louis couldn't come in and challenge us. The odds are somebody's going to come in and give us a game here. Is it this game? It's hard to see it. But certainly it's going to happen. Somebody's going to come in. Iona's going to not play as well, and there's the potential for it. Anything can happen in league play, like we said. But there's another factor I want to mention, and this is one it's not a fact. It's more like a probably often spoke of hypothesis that people have. Teams, when they go to tropical locations for a series of games and then come home, often put up a stinker when they get back home. I mean, think about it. You're in Hawaii. You're in a nice place like New Mexico, and you're on the road for a week and a half or more or whatever, and now all of a sudden you're back hold and it's 15 degrees in the Northeast or whatever it is, and now you're going to play in a tiny gym again. Thankfully, they're at home. And the other thing, thankfully, it is St. Peter's, who just did what they did last March. They're not sneaking up on everybody. Nobody's overlooking them. So there's a little bit of, it's better than hosting Quinnipiac right now or somebody like that. It's probably a little better that it's a St. Peter's type team that, it does have, strangely enough, name recognition at this moment. Now, there won't be students on campus, so that'll be interesting to see as well. Will the crowd turn out? Will for this at all? It's January 1st. It's a holiday. The whole world's hungover. It could be a lot of things that can make this one to one of those games where you look up and it's, 64-62 with 2 minutes to go. Who knows? It's possible, but but this is life in the MAC right now for Iona. They have to find a way, when they're not blowing somebody off the court based on sheer talent or ability or lack thereof from their opponent, finding a way to get by anyway. Sure, it's going to be easier at home for the most part. But, and certainly there are enough road games, and you'll hear me talk about it over and over again. Every road game in this league I can give you reasons why we can lose it. So, but this is a home game, and we'll worry about the road games when they're coming. I don't see us losing this game, but it is something to watch, though, based on the whole back from Hawaii, trying to get back to legs under them, playing in the Northeast in 15-degree weather again. So we shall see. And Iona can't afford to look by anybody. They can't afford to slip up, as we know. If they're going to hold the seed line, if you want to think in terms of NCAAs, I'm not going to get into at-large conversations. We've been talking about this on the Iona message board ad nauseum. I don't really like to have those conversations because it means we didn't win the MAC tournament, and I can't understand how this team wouldn't win the MAC tournament. So I'm not going to go there. I'm talking more of seed lines. Right now, I feel like we're at 12. If we end up 18-2, it might be more like a 13. That's how fickle the committee could be. So you can't slip up, especially at home. So this is one of those games I think Iona needs to put the Peacocks away early and just establish this one is done before we even get going. Anyway, it's about taking care of business, and it starts on New Year's Day. So I'm just going to wrap up this episode with a couple of scheduling notes. First off, Monday is your day to watch for this pod moving forward. Iona pretty much has a Friday, Sunday schedule the rest of the season, the next 2 months here. So Mondays are going to be the days episodes are going to drop. We'll have recaps and previews in every episode, usually with a guest. I do want to point out one hiccup in the schedule because it's coming up soon. So like I said, we'll be dropping episodes on Mondays, and that starts with Monday the 2nd. And I can tell you now, we're going to have Sam Fetterman back to join us to talk about how the MAC fared as a whole in non-conference play and who he likes and doesn't like going into league action as we settle into that. And we're going to have another episode on Monday the 9th, but then we'll have to we'll take a hiatus, and we're going to go 2 weeks until the next episode on the 23rd. I have a bunch of work travel in the middle of the month, and I just will not have an opportunity to do a podcast. Might even miss a game or two in there. Real life sometimes gets in the way. Can't help it. Anyway, from there on, though, it'll be every Monday through February, all the way to Sunday, March 5th, which is the day after the MAC regular season ends, 2 days before the MAC tourney begins. And we've got something special in the works for the MAC tournament preview, a little bit of a roundtable featuring podcast favorites such as Jaden Dalien, the aforementioned Sam Fetterman. So there you have it, the plan for the pod over the next 2 months. The plan for the Gales was pretty successful for non-conference play. And now it's time to see what MAC life has in store. Time to put away the charter flights and tropical locales and trade them for snowy bus rides and cold little gyms. Can the Gales go 20-0 in the MAC? Time will tell. Go Gales.
Thank you for listening to this edition of the IonaHoops.com podcast. This podcast is a production of IonaHoops.com with publisher Guy Filatico. The opinions shared during this podcast are those of Guy Filatico, IonaHoops.com, and any featured guests. This podcast is not affiliated with Iona University Athletics or the university itself. Thank you for supporting IonaHoops.com.